Now, the next thing we're going to take a look at is how we can build our own images using a Docker file to help document it. So we can move into our web directory, create a file using Nano or Vim, making sure that we've got a Docker file with an uppercase D. Inside of this, we can then say we're building it from our Ubuntu image. Inside of that Ubuntu image, we're going to run our apt update and install Nginx. We're going to expose port 80, so the container is going to be listening on port 80. We're going to add the index page that is already in our web directory through to the var www HTML directory. In Ubuntu, we're expecting the homepage to be in var www HTML. And the command that is going to run is going to be then the Nginx command itself. And it's running in the foreground rather than as background service because it's the command that runs when the container starts up. With the Docker file in place, we can then use sudo and docker image build, -t assigning the tag or name to the image. Here we're just calling it custom web. And then we can go through and use dot to specify the current directory. But don't miss out that dot at the end of the line there. It's saying where is our Docker file, and we're saying in our current directory. So this is exactly what we're going to take a look at now by moving out to our command line, looking at how we build image using our Docker file and the docker image build command. And look at this, joy of joy. We're back in our home directory on Ubuntu 2. When we move into our web directory, we've got this very simple index page that we created previously. Well, we're now going to add to it. Don't worry, we're not going to make the page any more complex, but we're going to create ourselves a Docker file. This can be an instruction to Docker image build on how an image should be constructed. Like all of these types of files are very good because they document what goes into the image. So I'm using Vim to edit it, but you could equally use Nano. It really doesn't matter. But once we're there, we can then go through and say from. So from which image are we going to build? So we're going to say our Ubuntu image. Then we can specify any commands that we want. And we can go through and do an apt update. On the same line, we're going to put ampersand. So if the apt update succeeds, we can go ahead and run an apt install -y and add in our Nginx web server. Now, the idea of putting on a single command, each run element is going to create its own separate sub-image, so we can keep the number of images that needs to be created to a minimum. Using the expose keyword, we can specify which port the container is going to listen on, so port 80, and we can add to our image the index page so we don't have to worry about our volume mapping. Sometimes volume mappings give you more flexibility because we can change the content without rebuilding the image. But here we're going to add our index page from the current directory through to var www HTML, which is the correct location for Nginx on Ubuntu. The command is really going to start our Nginx web server. So we want to run the executable Nginx. And we can specify the option -g. And that's going to have a value of daemon, we spell this correctly, off. We're not really running this as a service because it's running in the foreground of our container. Just make sure we've got the syntax there and a semicolon after off and close off our command list with a square bracket. But we are done and dusted with this, so I can save my changes. If it makes it easy, we can read the file back again, so cat and docker file, so we can see what we have created. If it all looks very good, then we're ready to create a brand new image. So we can use docker image and build. Assign a tag, so we're going to call it custom web. And remember the dot at the end of the line specifying from the current directory. All of the commands that we are seeing are being carried out inside of our image. but our image is now created and built the way that we need. Having completed the build process, why don't we go back to our Docker and image ls command so we can list those images, and there we've got our custom web image. So once we've created the image, then we know that we can create containers from this. But remember, we might already have a running container, so we can go back and tidy this up. So using our Docker container rm -f and then delete our web container if it's running. And we can go back up through our history to make sure then that we can get back to our previous run command, but it can be a lot shorter now. We can take out the volume mapping because our content is inside of the image now. And let's just change the Nginx image to our custom web image. Now with that done, we're still mapping our port, so we can go through and curl our local host, looking at port 8000, and there you go, we see our hello page, but the hello page is coming now directly from our image rather than from our mapped volume. I say sometimes we might find it a little bit easier to use mapped volumes because it's easier to change the content rather than in this case, well, we have to go back and rebuild our image. But we can delete our container and we're ready to move back to our slides now. So we might remind ourselves some of the things that we've looked at managing Docker on Ubuntu 2004.